League Division 3, 1969-70, Division 3, 18th, League Cup second round, FA Cup first round. Mark Pearson and Ivan Hampton were not the only players to leave the Shea during the close season. Mick Megan, after only one season here, took up the opportunity of becoming player-manager of League of Ireland side Drogheda, where amazingly he would win the last of his 17 Irish caps. Halifax Town was still awaiting its full first international, and there was a chance on the management side when Clive Baker, assistant coach for 5 years, moved to Rotherham United. Town offered his post to former Leeds and Scotland ace Bobby Collins, but he declined it, and in the end George Kirby, a player who had taken in Everton, Southampton, Coventry and Plymouth among his travels, took it on. Alan Ball stated that his main priority for the forthcoming season was survival in the third division, and he added quality to his squad to help ensure it. Dave Leonard, having been released by Bolton, had travelled with Town on a pre-season tour of Ireland. Megan's Drogheda side had provided the opposition in one of the games, and after impressing, became one of two close season signings. The second was another Bolton player, former England international Freddie Hill. On the 15th of July, Town paid a new club record £6,000 for his services, and while he was in action here, it seemed money well spent. Both Hill and Leonard took their place in Town's side that kicked off the new season in the home game against Shrewsbury at the Shea. Town won 1-0, but the club was concerned at the low attendance. Alas, apart from the local derbies that always attracted higher gates, this was as good as it was going to get. Town had won without Les Massey. He was top scorer in both his previous seasons here, who was named only as a substitute. 2 weeks into the season, still not having signed a new contract, Massey was sold to Bradford Park Avenue for £1,750, a move that came as a shock to many supporters. The Massey affair would raise its head intermittently whenever Town found goals hard to come by. The first such period as it happened being immediately after he was sold. 5 games into the league programme, that opening day win was their only one, with just 3 goals scored. Massey was not the only player to have left in controversial circumstances. After Town had gained a credible point from a 1-1 draw at leaders Luton, Hatters manager Harry Haslam, having been impressed by the performance of Chris Nicholl, immediately made an offer for the young centre-half. Half an hour after the final whistle, a deal was struck, and Nicholl became a Luton player, netting Town a record £30,000. Like the sale of Massey, Nicholl's transfer met with a great deal of criticism from the fans, but chairman Alan Madden defended the club's actions, saying that Luton had made an offer which Town were not in a position to turn down. The Shaymen had progressed to the second round of the League Cup, where they were drawn away at First Division West Ham, a side that included England World Cup winners Bobby Moore, Martin Peters and hat-trick hero Jeff Hurst. Town performed well at Upton Park, despite going down 4-2, and their performance hinted at nothing to suggest how they would capitulate against Fulham 2 weeks later. Fulham had been in the First Division themselves only 2 seasons earlier, so remained quite an attraction, especially with the mercurial forward England skipper Johnny Haynes in their side. In an amazing game, they trounced the Shaymen 8-0 at the Shea, with Steve Earle writing himself into the record books by scoring 5 goals. Alex Smith, his confidence shattered, took time to get over this hammering, and Alan Ball saw fit to omit him, the first time Smith had been dropped in his career. John Connaughton was drafted in on loan from Wilf McGuinness's Manchester United and made his debut in a 1-0 win at high-flying Torquay. But overall, Town's form was giving cause for concern. At the end of October, no sooner had Ball scotched rumours that he was about to take over at Notts County, that he re-signed Old Shea favourite Bill Atkins from Portsmouth, a new record deal worth £9,000. This resulted in Hugh Ryden, a disappointment this season, moving to Southport the following week. Atkins made his second Halifax Town debut in a 3-1 win over a Rochdale side seeking its 9th consecutive win. Town hit something of a purple patch. They suffered only 1 defeat out of 11 games, and by February had moved away from the relegation zone and into the top half of the table. Interest in the FA Cup had ended disappointingly meanwhile, with defeat at 4th Division Chester in a replay after a 3-3 draw at the Shea. But this was not the only disappointment that Halifax Town would suffer around this time. Their best player, Freddie Hill, broke 3 toes in a friendly with Sunderland on the 19th of January. Halifax won 4-0. And as things transpired, he would never play for the club again. Hill's layoff was offset somewhat by the arrival on the 22nd of January of crafty outside right Jave Chadwick from Bournemouth, another big money buy at £7,000. His performances were appreciated by the Shay faithful, who, despite improvements, continued to drift away. Chadwick made his debut in a 3-0 win over relegation-bound Barrow, one of the season's high points, but Town's good run could not last. Despite taking 2 forwards on loan, firstly Stoke City's former Northern Ireland international Ray Vernon, then Peter Graham from Barnsley, only 3 wins were recorded from the last 19 games. Relegation had only been talked about lightly at the Shay, but in the end it was avoided by just 4 points. In early March they had been clear of the drop zone by 10 points. Their last victory indeed was on the 28th of March, but it was a memorable one. A diving header by Chadwick right on half-time was enough to see off then-division leaders Brighton at the Shay. Town wound up the season with 4 consecutive defeats. By this time, the people of Halifax had already lost interest, with less than 2,000 turning up for the visit of Walsall on the last day. Vice-Chairman David Waifman, who had resigned from the board at the end of October, 2 months after Alan Walton had quit, had expressed his concerns over the lack of support Halifax Town were enjoying. Things had not improved. It had been in some ways a strange season. Where else would a player who missed almost half the season's fixtures for injury be voted by the supporters as the player of the season, as Freddie Hill was? To be fair, it could be argued that a team should be judged over a full league programme. Alan Ball had wanted Town to remain a Division 3 side come the end of the season, and so to that end at least, he must have been satisfied with Town's 18th place finish.